Recording will start soon. Wow. All right, says we're recording. Yeah. Okay. So thanks everyone for being here. Really appreciate your time. We'll do a little round of intro so we can make sure everyone knows everyone else, because we actually haven't done this meeting for a long time, which is kind of embarrassing. I'm William. I have an official role with Linkerd these days, which is I'm a director, which is a glorious and power-filled position. Linkerd has a code of conduct, which you can find on github.com/linkerd2/conduct.md. So be sure to refer to that if you have any questions about your own behavior during this meeting, which I'm sure we won't need. But with that, why don't we do a round of intros? Thank you, Flynn, for pasting that in the chat, code_of_conduct.md. So please, let's see, Flynn, why don't we start with you and then introduce yourself, and then you pick the next person to introduce themselves. And you're muted.
I hit my unmute button, but of course that only works with Zoom. I'm completely certain that everybody on this call already knows who I am, but I am these days a tech evangelist for Buoyant, working with the open source side of Linkerd, except that I keep getting pulled into the not so open source side of Linkerd as well. I've been doing the cloud native thing since 2016 and computing for a whole lot longer than that. Christian, you can go next because you're in the middle of my screen.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm Christian Hüning. I'm working with Linkerd, I would say, since the very beginning of the product, or the project rather. I'm doing Kubernetes since 2015-ish. And before that, a bit of Docker. So I'm in the cloud space now since roughly 10 years. And yeah, then I'd like to hand it over to Steve.
I'm Steve. I'm the CEO of ZeroFlux. We do software for the sports betting industry. I've been using Linkerd on and off now for obviously a fairly long time, having used it here, but also previously at my last company, Entain. So yeah, that's basically what we do. And Dan.
Hello everyone, I'm Dan. I'm a senior infrastructure engineer for Love Holidays. Love Holidays is Europe's largest online travel agent, so we essentially sell package holidays. I've been around Google Cloud and sort of the Kubernetes ecosystem since 2015. We've been live in production with Linkerd for probably 18 months now. I'm still back on 2.14 at the moment, but we're making the jump into enterprise in the next couple of weeks. David.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, I'm David. I work with Buoyant. Most of my time is focused with the open source team, helping execution of our product roadmap, which I also contribute to. Oliver.
I'm Oliver. Hi.
Extra special maintainer of Linkerd. All right, cool. Thanks, everyone. And a special thank you to Christian and to Dan for staying up late, and a special thank you to Steve for waking up early, and to David for staying up late. So, this is an awkward set of time zones across all of us. I think next time maybe we'll try it in a different way and make Steve stay up late and have the...
Yeah, I'll do the late shift next time, so I'll get some breakfast.
We'll figure out a way to make it happen. So, yeah, I'll give a little context and refresher. Some of you have been on the steering committee in the past, many years ago, and some of you are new to the project, which is awesome. Or new to the steering committee, not new to the project. I pasted in a link to the agenda doc in there, which is also like a public doc. So everything we're doing here is going to be open source, part of the project, and kind of on the public record. We are supposed to have steering committee meetings per project governance, at least once a quarter. Obviously, that hasn't happened for several years, and that's kind of embarrassing. So now we're going to get back into the swing of it. And you can read through in that same repo that has a code of conduct. You can read through steering.md and kind of like get your bearings for what we're asking you all to do, which is extremely appreciated by everyone working on Linkerd, and thank you in advance. We're going to be asking you lots of hard questions and to help us navigate some of the issues in front of the project. I think primarily the way I think about it as steering committee is the voice of the user. So your responsibility in this role is to make sure Linkerd is doing the right things for its users. So, but read the whole doc, if you want to get the full flavor of the soup. And then, I put together this agenda in the Google Doc. Feel free to add, remove, sure, or whatever there. This was just kind of off the top of my head and collaborative, off the top of my head and spontaneous. But this is a collaborative meeting, so it doesn't have to be like me dictating the agenda. So far, so good?
Yep.
Okay, great. So, barring any requests to the contrary, the first thing I was going to start with was kind of a summary of this meeting we had with TOC, I think two months ago. Oliver and I were in there, all the TOC members were there. And that meeting was kicked off kind of in response to the announcement we made in 2.15, which was that we were no longer going to be producing stable releases as part of the open source project. So I was going to kind of describe that meeting and give some context there. Does anyone want to discuss before we dive into that? Is there anything top of mind for anyone else here?
That's probably the single biggest item in the last quarter, isn't it?
Yeah, and that, to be frank, one of the outcomes of that meeting was the TOC saying, hey, you know what? You're supposed to have these steering committee meetings. Why haven't you done them? And I was saying, oh, yeah, you're right. Kind of forgot about those. So, a little bit of egg on our face, but here we are. And then after that, I kind of have cursorily put roadmap review maintainers to present. I think that's going to be like kind of a verbal description of what we're planning. Would love to get everyone's feedback and input on that. Like, are those the sorts of things that we want to tackle as a project? Is anything out of scope? Should we be thinking about something else in advance of the current plans, so on and so forth? So feel free to draw from your own experience running Linkerd. One of the requirements to be on the steering committee is that you either have to be currently responsible for a non-trivial Linkerd deployment, or you need to have done so within the past, I think, 2 years. So we really want this to be an opportunity for people who have hands-on experience with Linkerd, have deployed it in anger, have had to wake up at 3 a.m., or hopefully not, to deal with it falling over, and get as much of that, direct feedback into the roadmap and into the ears of the maintainers as possible. Make sense?
Yep.
Okay, so then I'll give a brief summary of this TOC meeting and maybe some of the context, which is in the 2.15 announcement, which was in February. One of the things we announced from the perspective, of the open source project is that we were no longer going to be doing open source stable releases. We were just going to be doing edge releases from that forward. And then there were some buoyant announcements kind of related to that too. And so one of the outcomes of that was that I think a lot of people were like, oh, what's going on here? And the TOC did what is a relatively standard thing for them to do when they have lots of feedback from the community, which is they did a health check. Part of that health check was, kind of a closed door meeting with Oliver and myself and any of the other maintainers who wanted to attend. And we kind of talked through, a bunch of stuff. The outcome, which is all in this TOC GitHub issue, which you can track down, was basically, yeah, you know, like nothing that you've done is like in violation of the CNCF rules or mandates or whatever, which we kind of knew because, you know, we were trying not to do anything we weren't supposed to do. They also asked us to do a formal governance review, so that's on my plate to kind of file an issue with the tag contributor strategy, I think is the group that does that, where we'll talk about, you know, kind of like how Linkerd does its governance, and, you know, that's where the steering committee comes up and things like that. So that conversation may also like lead to some of you being pinged or involved, you know, by tag contributor strategy people. So if that happens, I'll try and give you some advance notice, but, you know, just be aware. That conversation still has to happen. I think the goal of that, you know, if you read through that TOC, kind of the comment on the issue, the goal of that was basically to ensure that Buoyant is not doing anything that kind of precludes other vendors from getting involved in the Linkerd project, right? And then like that was the primary thing that TOC wanted to assess, which I feel pretty confident in, but you know, we'll run through the whole process. So that's kind of the output of that meeting. Was like, okay, cool, you know, do a governance review. We'll check back in 6 months, you know, and otherwise carry on. Obviously, there's a lot to be said about kind of the, you know, some of the changes we've made around how we're doing edge releases and things like that. But yeah, that was kind of the overview of the meeting.
Yeah, I mean, one of the questions I had, I saw the Dave from the CNCF, his response after that meeting, and he was talking about like core versus sub projects. And so does that mean some of the stuff is going to be more, you know, like procedurally, a lot of the things that used to be those modules, like, you know, the old Viz stuff, where it was all separate repo. It's kind of all migrated its way back into that main repo. Is that going to be kind of the other direction again?
Well, so that's what I have for topic number 5, and I know Oliver has put a lot of thought into this. You know, it kind of came up in the context of like, hey, look, one of the reasons why we're doing this is because we really want to streamline development on Linkerd and make sure that the maintainers, you know, which are a small group of people in the grand scheme of things, can really focus on kind of the core mission of the project. And as part of that, we want to take all the things that are not, you know, core to the project and make sure that the guarantees around those and you know, around like responsiveness and PRs and things like that is really made clear. So that was how that conversation went. In agenda item 5, you know, I wanted to like kind of formally get your all's opinion about what the right way to do that is. But I know Oliver has put a ton of thought into this too, so I don't want to like speak for the whole project. Anything you want to add, you know, before we get to that point, Oliver?
No, I mean, it's all like, you know, given infinite time and effort, we would modularize everything and then have it all clearly marked, but it's you know, much more intertwined today. So it's not really, those goals aren't, it might be directionally where we're headed, but it's hard for us to put engineering resources behind those efforts for the most part.
Yeah, and that's kind of, you know, when we get into that discussion, that's really going to be the kind of the trade-off we all have to navigate is, you know, if there's a million things we would love to have happen with the project, and there is only a very few, you know, maintainer hours in a given day. So, you know, have to be very cognizant of that. I should have asked before, is everyone able to read these meeting minutes? Would it be helpful if I share them? I'm kind of like staring them off to the side in this window, but would anyone care?
I kind of
don't know.
prefer it this way, honestly.
I'm staring at them.
Okay, great. All right. Any other questions? Steve, thank you for that one about the TOC closed door meeting. Okay. Like I said, you know, all of the like public outcome of that meeting is logged in the GitHub issue and things like that. Dan, I know Steve and Christian have been very aware of like a lot of this stuff. Is this all new to you? You're like the fresh meat in the steering committee, the fresh oxygen being being brought into the room. Is this all new to you? Are you like, what are these people talking about?
I'm a fly on the wall. I'm keeping an eye on the thread. I'm keeping an eye on a lot of the conversations, but I'm not actively involved in them. So it's not new, but I'm not versed enough to comment either.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And I'm being, obviously I'm being very careful here to talk about just kind of the open source components of the project. Obviously I wear multiple hats, and these multiple hats are highly related at this point. But yeah, from the perspective of the project, I think that's kind of an accurate description. And if any of you have been using Edge releases recently, which I don't think is the case for you folks,
Well,
but
have any of y'all tried any of the Edge releases?
We've been playing with some of them for upgrades. We are moving we had a cluster that's running 2.14. We are actually moving up to the enterprise version of the product, but we have been playing with some of the latest Edge releases. But yeah, it's not been a huge priority the last 2 or 3 weeks for us at the moment.
Yeah, and actually we use, Edge releases and some of our production systems too as kind of like a final, check and balance before they go out. But if anyone was really using Edge releases heavily, I would hope you would notice like how much more streamlined those are. We've really tried to make them kind of, first class ways to consume Linkerd, get them out fast, have the change log is like largely automated, and then Flynn is doing kind of some extra polish on the top to kind of add a little context about like, yes, this is a recommended one, or like we're not sure, or whatever. So really trying to make these a completely viable way to run Linkerd in production, and part of this has been kind of changing the attitude in the community a bit and saying, hey, look, these have all the latest bug fixes, all the latest security patches, all the latest features. They're built off of main, so you don't get the SEMVer guarantees, but they have all of the stuff, and we run them ourselves, and they go through rigorous testing and all that stuff.
Yep.
Well, I mean, it's kind of a little bit of part of the Linkerd experience. Is occasionally you find some new Kubernetes thing that's on fire, and you end up having to put an Edge release out for like the CNI or something. So we, even though we don't actively use it day to day, we are frequently using Edge artifacts out in the wild periodically just by necessity. Particularly because, at least for us, we're out in the Wild West on, we're not using AWS, we're using Oracle Cloud. So one of the less mainstream cloud solutions, that's obviously going to be a really interesting one for us.
Yeah, great. And then, maybe Oliver, question for you from the maintainer perspective. Part of the motivation here was to get faster bug reports from people. Have you seen that at all since this switch happened?
I don't know specifically. I mean, we still get a lot of bug reports for 2.14. So it's still in that like first couple releases since that's happened. So the general upgrades get time is not like immediate for a lot of folks. I guess we have gotten bug reports about some of the native sidecar features, which were newer. So yeah, I think we. I don't know if it's changed. I don't have any data to say whether it changed or not, but we are still getting steady feedback. I would not say that it's like dried up or anything like that since the change.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay, we kind of segued into Edge releases there for a second. Next on the agenda is roadmap review. Oliver, do you want to take that? You want to pass the hot potato?
I have not prepared that at all. I mean, I can tell you what I'm working on, and we could probably cobble together what folks are working on right now. But like, are we talking about the future, like roadmap beyond like what's actively being staffed at the moment, or are we talking about?
No, I'd say for kind of the next couple months, next 6 months. What's kind of like on the planning, the foreseeable horizon.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's a lot of the same things. IPv6 is in the process of wrapping up, so that's in edge releases now, and we're starting to get some cloud testing there, and integrating that through multi-cluster and some of the mesh expansion work that's planned in 2015. So that continues, but that should be testable, I think, in latest edges. You can use IPv6 in some environments. What else is going on? David, you've got things hopefully, but off the top of your head. I'm working on gateway, I think, again, so pulling in retries, timeouts, client configuration, some little load balancer and circuit breaking tuning into that work, hopefully. So I'm excited about that because it'll open up a bunch of configuration, which is not really broadly tunable in Linkerd, hopefully. Always bug fixes and testing and hardening, and we're on the longer roadmap towards ingress, which a lot of the work around gateway API and like hardening hyper servers to talk to untrusted clients and adding timeouts and making this configurable is a lot of the setup work we're doing right now for that kind of future of more proxies, more places.
Yeah, yes, a couple of things that you missed is we're also going to be doing egress and probably doing egress before ingress because it's a smaller unit of work, we hope. And then also we're going to add like a dry run audit mode for authorization policy. It's something that's come up a bunch of times. It's a gap that we have. So this will be, you can apply policies, but they don't actually block traffic. They'll just tell you that they would have. So you can roll out authorization policies in a safer and probably more aggressive way. But yeah, I think that gateway API parity work, route metrics, timeouts, retries, gRPC route support, that's the brunt of it that will be coming hopefully next after IPv6.
Well, for the dry run, I mean, that sounds like a very handy feature because I've been on the wrong side of these a few times. We actually, for all our new build stuff the last 2 years, we've been doing deny by default and gradually opening the throttle. But we do occasionally pick up parts of solutions from elsewhere where we want to, kind of bring them in, and we just don't know what the paths are. So that'll be some. Would the experience there from a developer perspective be that we'd be tailing the proxy to see on the target side to see that's making those decisions, or is that going to be part of the Linkerd CLI? So I can just look at the whole cluster and see who's screaming.
I think initially we're going to target logs and metrics, and then yeah, we'll probably look at ways in which we can make it easier to consume those as an operator. I don't think we've got as far as scoping out the exact user interface to it yet, but we're basically aiming for, like, you could monitor metrics to know that there are violations of the policy, or you could tail logs.
Cool.
But I think that's a good idea to have some CLI command, make it easier to consume across the.
Yeah, I was thinking like the edges or something, that kind of experience. Just because I think it'll be very easy to. Is it going to be part of the custom resource when you put it in? It'll say like dry run true or something. And then you take that out to make it real, or.
I'll defer to Oliver there.
We haven't scoped any of this yet, so TBD, right? That's to be designed. Yeah, hopefully soon, but wrapping up IPv6 first.
What's happening around egress?
Packets go out.
I think the two things that we've basically scraping the GitHub issues that we've realized people care about are having metrics, being able to monitor that traffic, and then also just ways in which we can enact policy. So we've taken a look at the sort of prior art there, and it seems like if you have TLS origination of that traffic, you can do a lot more in terms of visibility and metrics, and also for policy. And so we're kind of at that stage of we're going to try and prototype that and and see where that takes us. But ultimately, the idea would be to solve those two problems, policy and metrics.
Egress metrics is something I'm asked about at least once a week.
Yeah. And is it those two things or one of those two things?
It's purely just metrics, so we're not using anything policy based. So pretty much our entire Linkerd implementation is just to have unified metrics. So we very heavily utilize service profiles across our stack.
Right.
What do you get asked about, Dan? Is it like, hey, is it like what's traffic's leaving the cluster, or is it something more specific?
Basically, it's golden metrics for outbound HTTP calls. So people want to have their latency success rate for external HTTPS addresses.
This is for like third-party APIs that you're calling?
Yeah.
Is that, maybe this is my naive question, is that going to be even doable for us unless we are doing the TLSing? Like if the client is TLSing that connection, would we even have access to the HTTP calls to be able to generate latency metrics?
I think the way that Envoy/Istio have solved it is that they sniff the SNI to get at least the external domain. So I don't know if you can get per route metrics, but you can at least get by domain.
But all we would get is like byte level metrics, right? We wouldn't know anything else if the client were initiating that TLS.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why the TLS origination is useful. I mean, you need that if you're going to get.
Yes, it's basically going to be a thing where like the more, the closer you can push that towards the proxy, the more things we can do for you. But we wanted trying to do it in a progressive way where maybe you don't want to set that up. You just want to know where's traffic leaving the cluster and where to, and start there. And then to get golden metrics, you might want to set up TLS origination.
Yeah, that's
William, there are some weird. Sorry, go ahead.
I would say that's going to be like kind of the two questions I've got around the feature as well would be, is it possible to send essentially a plain text request out and have the egress gateway actually handle wrapping that up and converting it out to TLS so we get some sort of telemetry over the request. And the other thing as well is, if you're going to work inside kind of crazy air-gapped environments, are we able to basically transparently manage proxy level configuration for egress at the Linkerd level versus managing it on application by application? So, for example, hypothetically, if you want to hit if you got to use Squid to get out of the environment or something, that you could be able to use Linkerd to kind of centralize that problem.
Yeah, that's an interesting use case because, like, as we're scoping this, we're trying to figure out how much of what, for example, Istio does is actually a priority for our customers. So they do support a mode where they integrate well with like legacy sort of proxies, and then they also support a standalone egress gateway. None of that's needed if you do the TLS origination at the local sidecar, because then you can do a lot more there.
Yeah.
So I think we're still trying to make that exact decision. So this would be a good vehicle to influence that, to be honest.
Envoy has a bunch of really weird ways you can run it for egress that, on balance, feel like having the local proxy originate TLS is just cleaner.
I think it's almost objectively cleaner. It's just, I mean, typically when software in this space, especially those with lots of enterprise customers, have solved multiple ways, it's probably because some of their customers are stuck with weird constraints and had to grow to support that. So,
yep.
I think with a lot of the stuff, we try and keep it simple. And so for me, the simplest thing would be to solve TLS origination first, and then listen to feedback for folks where that doesn't work. There's a legacy ticket on egress where someone put together a plain text centralized prototype, and then the first comment on it was that wouldn't work in our environment. Security wouldn't go for that. We need everything that originated in the sidecar. So I don't know. I don't think there's a one size fits all solution for everyone here, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, David, if if Dan, Steve, Christian, or other people in the community have like specific things they're looking for with egress, what's the best? What should they do? Should they go to that? I know we have that like kind of legacy egress. I don't want to call it legacy. The one long-standing egress GitHub issue. Should they go there? Or would you prefer something else?
We could, yeah, we could either ping one of those tickets and invite people also on Slack to contribute feedback of what we should prioritize first, or we could post a design doc when it's done and solicit feedback that way, and so people could react to what we're planning to actually implement. Because we have this like RFC process that we do, and maybe we need to make some of that more public as well. So yeah, I'm open to suggestions for how to get, because all of this feedback is invaluable, right? So a lot of times I'm just trying to pull it from comments in Slack.
Yeah, which also disappear after 90 days. So, I guess the base case here is you search the Linkerd GitHub issues for egress, and then you like add your comment to the bottom of this thing that's been open since 2019, and like it's fine. But at least that keeps a record permanent. We do look at those issues. I'm sure there's a better solution in the long run.
Yeah, I think the hardest part of having egress support in Linkerd will be people who complain about its absence, having to find something you talk about, because it's like one of the #1 request areas for people.
Yeah, I'm excited to get it out of the way. Is anyone here? Is IPv6 relevant to anyone here? Christian,
Yes.
thank goodness. I knew we brought you for a reason.
It's very relevant. So
Right.
Did you see that it's in Edge 24.5.2?
no, I did not.
It is.
That's very good to know.
I'm gonna play with it later.
I'll point a special person to take a look at it. First me, and then somebody else. So this is actually very relevant, and it's solving another piece of the puzzle for us to. In fact, we want to go full IPv6. So.
Yeah, so not even dual stack, but like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess for an intermediate period, but the goal is to go full IPv6.
Yeah, great. Yeah, well,
Very
please,
cool.
if you get a chance, kick the tires on the latest Edge release. That's how we found out. That's how we found a bunch of issues. Like Oliver said, that's how we found a bunch of issues with native sidecar support, which we thought was in great shape until it met the, till the rubber met the road of reality. The rubber of our dreams met the road of reality.
All right. Yeah, we'll try.
One last question, then we'll move on to the next section. At least for me, one last question is, Dan, you mentioned you're using service profiles. Are you doing anything, or is anyone else doing anything with the Gateway API types and with service profiles at the same time, or is everyone in one camp or the other?
We are not, because as far as I know, it's one or the other, right? We can't lose the per route metrics, so we're not using any of the gateway stuff. Coincidentally, we have just finished the Gateway API migration, so we've killed all the ingresses, so we've got the conflicts between the different resources, but we're not using any of the Linkerd gateway.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Was going to ask if there's a plan for the metrics within the gateway resources.
I think this is Oliver's whole entire waking hours.
Yeah, we're looking at. I mean, there already are counters, and we're looking at adding a bunch more metrics on the per route side of outbound and gateway.
Random question: Are any of y'all writing custom code that pays attention to any of the Gateway API CRDs, or are you just relying on existing Goose controllers and service meshes to do it for you.
From our point, we're all we're using traffic as our ingress. We're not. The main challenge for us using any of the gateway stuff at the moment is a lot of the capabilities don't really exist if you're using gRPC as your backbone with applications talking. So things like retries or what's been kind of like a lot of the value behind it isn't there for using gRPC today for us.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that the current intersection between the service profile stuff and gateway API is like a little busted in some ways. So that's something, Dan, that we're actively trying to fix. And I think in the next major release, we should have some
feel like
better
ticking time counts, because as more and more people on board routes and service profiles and so on, the migration effort is just getting continuously worse.
Yeah, I guess a couple of notes on the migration. So the one thing we have no plans anytime soon to like force a migration. So we have no plans to like deprecate service profiles, because we understand that we have no automatic migration story for metrics. And I know like folks like you, just from reading Slack, that you've built like canary analysis platforms on top of those metrics. So with that in mind, yeah, like we tried to figure out a way where we could port the metrics directly from service profile style to routes, and there's just like an impedance mismatch there. So that's going to be a migration, unfortunately. But yeah, like the fallback there is, we'll keep service profile around. We probably, or not probably, we won't be adding new features to it. So as we add more like unique sort of traffic management features, you might be in that situation where like you don't want to do the migration, but you want, you want a gateway API feature, and that's probably something we'll need to discuss if there is ways we could mitigate that. But yeah.
Okay.
And are you generating your service profiles from Swag, from OpenAPI, or
no,
you're manually? Okay.
Yeah, I must have misread somewhere. I thought service profiles were on the deprecation path, so I thought I had.
We had hoped that there would be a clean way for us to deprecate them and have that be managed. And as we've gotten into it, we realized that like, okay, there's going to be these two paths for a while, and like we need to build up the new one so it's more appealing. But the other one can't go away anytime soon.
That's good to know.
All right, cool. Any other roadmap questions or comments? Sounds like everyone's excited about egress, which is awesome.
It's like to hear that at least some people are excited about V6.
Christian gets his IPv6 ice cream early. Everyone else gets to wait for egress.
How's the native?
We don't do egress, so I don't need egress.
That's the best. The best egress is no egress.
Exactly.
What was
And,
that, Steve?
Native sidecars?
Yes, I know it's a feature in 2.15, right? Is it being used? Is it well received? We're going to be making that jump in the next couple of weeks.
It has been used, as Oliver mentioned. We have unfortunately seen a number of bugs reported, and that's where we've seen the Edge version. But we've been responding to them so that the latest Edge has the last two Edges, I think, have native sidecar fixes, just small things that we're working through. But I guess
2.15 will have fixes for a bunch of the known ones at least. I think it hasn't been used in anger yet, right? So I think it looks good. There's nothing that we've noticed that's like with some of the CLI tooling was where we had the bugs where like, oh, we weren't looking at the right right container in some of the checks. So that stuff has mostly been flushed out. But I think we'll see how it actually integrates, whether there's CNIs and like the rubber meets the road of it will be the real test. But no known blockers at this point.
Nice. I personally can't wait to get rid of Linkerd await. It wraps some of our long-running tools in that. Looking forward to that going.
Yeah, it's a huge improvement to any a job workflow. My sense is people have been kicking the tires, and that's why we're getting all these bug reports. So you won't be the first. You won't be the first one jumping into the water.
That is one where
And if you're-
that is one where I would encourage you to take a look at the release notes before you upgrade, because we try to call out things like that. And yeah, there have definitely been a couple of things that, as I played with this for Service Mesh Academy, there were a couple of things that I ran into that were a little counterintuitive. And I believe that those are all dealt with now, but keep an eye out.
Out of curiosity, does the situation with if you need the CNI, you'll still need it with native sidecars, or is it when we switch over, we don't need the CNI anymore?
I don't think those are generally related.
Yeah, no, it's just like the proxy init is going to run as an init container still. So none of that really changes. It's just, I think we don't know how this, we haven't seen it. Like, we've run with other init containers. We haven't run with other native sidecars. There's going to be some integration pain, I'm sure, but I think there aren't any changes with CNI today.
Yeah, well, one of the interesting challenges we have with the elasticity of the workloads at the moment is just around when a node comes up on AWS or EKS, you've got there's that first 5 minutes where the networking isn't quite in the right state. And so the changes that came out, I think it was in 2.14, where it would back off. There was a network validator added. It's really helped out there. So I'm just wondering if some native sidecars would somehow improve that. But no, probably not.
Yeah, there is the repair controller now that you can turn on as well, which will roll pods in a bad state that detect the native will detect the network validator being unhealthy.
What's that feature called?
Repair controller. It's in the newer version of the CNI.
Cool.
And that one has been actively used because I think that was one of the most hotly requested improvements to CNI that we've ever had.
And we haven't got any bugs on it yet, so knock on wood. But...
And there are people using it and relying on it now.
All right, cool. So let's see, we got about 13 minutes remaining on the official meeting time. I do want to make sure we talk about this next thing, which was an ask from the TOC that came out of the meeting. You can read the full text of this which is in the meeting notes, but basically they want us to have a better it wants to update the development roadmap to better define the core and sub-project integration. And I think what the intent is here is one of the things we talked about in that meeting was, hey, we're trying to really streamline things, make sure the developers on Linkerd, the maintainers, are totally focused on most important stuff. And as part of that, there's things like Viz, which is frankly has been unmaintained for years, which is really unfortunate, but it's the bottom of the priority list. So I guess I'll leave this really open-ended. If you read those two kind of requests from the TOC, what do you guys think, or what do you folks think we should be doing with things like Linkerd Viz? I'll pick on that. That are kind of outside the core project, not required to be used. Some components of it heavily relied on, other components of it heavily relied on and unmaintained. What do we do with this in terms of governance, and and as well, and also in terms of development roadmap? I'll just leave that as an open-ended question.
I mean, Viz is very much the poor stepchild here, isn't it, in terms of evolution? But a lot of the things that going back 2-3 years ago, a lot of the things that became those external repos and plugins, like the tracing support and stuff. It was basically all it was doing was architecting environment variables for the core anyway. So the feature really did exist in all the core. It's kind of a plugin in name only. And so I think, I know it's very hard when a lot of the capabilities just need to exist in the proxy. They need to exist in the control plane anyway. So having that delineation isn't as valuable as it probably was a couple of years ago for some of these things.
Yeah, but I think from our side, it's like I don't want to. Tracing is not a first-class feature, in my opinion. Like, it is kind of secondary. Like, yep, if we can get tracing to work, if folks can contribute and help maintain it, like, sure, but like, it's not our core job to be done. So, like, some of these integrations, especially, right? It's like any integrations with standards that are always changing. So they're like, okay, we need to move off of this tracing API onto this tracing API, and we need to upgrade this Jaeger. Like, there's all this integration work, right? That comes out of these. So I do think we need to choose which integrations are core and versus which ones are like we'll try to maintain, but yeah, it's an integration.
Maybe another thing to ask is like, is there a way where we can make it easier for community contributions on those parts of the project? Because you're right, Steve, like some of the extensions are critical to like production use for Linkerd. Multi-cluster is like critical. CNI, I think, is technically an extension, and some of them are not. Some of them are like Jaeger and Viz. For those Jaeger and Viz ones, they're also kind of orthogonal from the rest of the project. You don't have to like deeply understand Linkerd to really work on those things. Is there something different we do with how we structure those that makes them more amenable to community contributions? Maybe the bar is lower.
There's opportunities to kind of plug into the trouble is you end up starting off down the Terraform road of defining a plugin interface that people start plugging into, and then moving some of these built-in things to use that. But obviously, doing it somewhere as performance sensitive as the networking stack is obviously a little bit more tricky than in principle. Could tracing be entirely externalized from the platform? Does it? Maybe. I don't know. It's a hard one, especially with something performance critical like this.
Even there, Viz is a little bit interesting too, in that it's not, a lot of people in production will be using Hunger and things that just scrape the metrics directly, right? But we have a lot of stuff out there that tells people, oh, you can do quick checks with this by running Linkerd Viz. And so, or, use Linkerd Viz stat and things like that. So Viz is still in a weird place. Although I guess we could separate the Viz command line from the Viz GUI too.
Yeah, I mean, particularly the Prometheus. I used to call it dangerous by default. The Linkerd Viz built-in Prometheus, because it worked very well for like the 3 or 4 like test pods you ran, and the second you put that into production, you're instantly in crash loop back off. The Viz UI doesn't work. You get control plane components start to error and so forth. And so people aren't familiar with Prometheus just end up getting an interesting position with it. Certainly when going back 3-4 years ago when I first started using Linkerd, that was just one of the most painful parts of the system. We ended up replacing it with Victoria metrics in the end.
I mean, do you think there's something different we do with that kind of for Viz specifically, with that pre-packaged Prometheus? When we built that thing, I think the intent was, hey, it's all in one box. Press a button and like, ta-da, you've got this magical dashboard, which is awesome for onboarding. But obviously, a whole bunch of constraints around that. Do we not have that Prometheus? Like, there is a bring your own Prometheus mode. We could say, you know what, we throw away our internal Prometheus, and this only works with your own Prometheus that you have to manage in some other way. Is that like
just ask them to take a little bit of capability and install their own Helm chart for it, versus having that default one that will just because otherwise, I think just people end up very naturally burning themselves early on. But also one of the coolest things with Viz was you fired it up, you could see visually your services talking. And I think a lot of people's first bite of Linkerd is cool was that little spring diagram in the Linkerd web UI. I mean, I think that was. I don't want to say that was the entire reason we went with the project originally, But you know, like there will be people who are impulsively looking at that diagram and go, "Oh,
It's pretty cool. I mean,
so it appears to be a bit of a discussion between having something to impress management, something like that, or convince people. And I'm wondering if, I mean, or just checking that everything's working, but it's not really suited for real production debugging or whatever. So I wonder, is it really that hard these days to run Prometheus? And also, is it really necessary, like, to have that case? That sounds to me more like a bit of a product thing, if you will.
yeah, but it's so easy to install a Prometheus from a Helm chart these days anyway. So it's just a case of you're installing one Helm chart for Linkerd, you may as well do another one for Prometheus and just be done with it. Versus having that. Otherwise, you're going to expose the whole configuration surface of Prometheus through the viz component as well, through the values YAML.
That brings you into all the pain of the custom scrape config that Linkerd viz brings you with the built-in Prometheus. So if you did away with that, you're going to open yourself up to thousands of bug reports where people have got incorrect scrape configs.
But what is it good for in the end? I mean, if you have it in Viz, but you can't really use Viz in, I mean, actually in production, does it actually help you?
We use Viz a lot.
do you use the GUI or do you use the command line?
Use the GUI. I use the GUI for the tap features, so I use it for debugging incoming headers.
Okay.
I know a lot of our software engineers use the GUI just to see what's going on. They like the visual thing of the service profile routes.
Are any of them, Dan, JavaScript programmers? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So maybe that's the solution here. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I want to pause here because there's two more things that I want to make sure we get to on the agenda. I don't think we've like kind of really definitively answered the question, but you know, if you guys don't mind, you folks don't mind kind of thinking through this a little bit in your spare time or in your dreams, if you have bright ideas, you know, especially ways where we can kind of make it clear that, hey, this is like the community contribution part of the project or something like that, that'll allow us to kind of separate those out from the core, really, really hard stuff where you really have to be in sync with the whole team. I'd love to have those ideas, and, you know, feel free to paste them in the Slack or put them in the, you know, we have an official steering committee meeting or steering committee mailing list, you know, whatever, you know how to reach us. There's a million ways. All right, two more quick things on the agenda that I want to make sure we cover before we break. There is a blog post PR from someone at Intel. I don't want to go over it as a group right now, but I put it on here because, like, this is one of the things where, like, I don't really know what to do. Does this belong on the Linkerd blog or not? I love getting outside contributions. You know, is the content, you know, kind of right here? Is this like a pitch for like Intel hardware, or is this like a, you know, a valid thing to want to share with the rest of the open source community? I was hoping that you folks could help me make a call on that, because I don't want to be the, you know, the arbiter, sole arbiter of that stuff, or, you know, have Flynn be the sole arbiter of that stuff. So if you get a few moments to take a look at that, I would love any input on that. Right now, it's just been kind of lingering in PR land. And then the final thing that I just wanted to like sanity check with you all is, because of the Edge release kind of mode that we're in now, when we announce something like, hey, Linkerd 215 or 216 or 217, you know, and kind of like major features, there actually is no artifact that corresponds to that in open source. So there's no, like, you can't go and get 2.16 or whatever. That was one of the things that came up in the TOC conversation. So I think the easiest way for us to address that is to have a tag in the GitHub repo that says, hey, this is the point in time at which, you know, this is what we're talking about with 2.16. That's like no effort.
Yeah, it's a hard one because it's either 216 or it isn't. Yeah, and so you know, yeah. If you label it, this is this is equivalent to 2.16, people will start treating it as if it's 2.16, and then just get into this rabbit hole of, well actually it's not.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And the reason why we're in this situation is because I continue to believe that like being able to put a version on things and like say, hey, this is a big announcement for Linkerd. It's, this release, it's a package of features. It's really good for the project. Like it's motivating for us. And it's like, kind of makes sense as a package. But in a world where you have only Edge releases to download and you don't have an Edge release called 2.16, maybe a little weird.
It's probably
I
only
think
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, there was a delay. There was some talk previously of having like those milestone or marker releases. Could just be an orthogonal set of numbers that just says, "Hey, we've delivered this capability. It is in Linkerd open source milestone 4 or Bell 2.16." But that's where the feature exists, but doesn't imply the parity between the two releases. Because I think if we just start using the same numbers, people will almost continue to expect the same guarantees from them if those aren't the guarantees anymore. That's really my take.
Yeah.
So you're suggesting to write up like posts about that feature is out now, it's in that Edge release, or starting from that Edge release, it's included, and do that on a by feature or per feature way.
Yeah, I mean something like that, but also as well to William's point, there is just a little bit of a rallying thing about having a major marker release. I just think was it 2.11 or 2.10 that was that really painful release when it came out?
2.11.
There was just that huge. Oh, thank God it's over for the wait. So there is value in having a numbered thing somewhere. At least, But yeah, it's whatever you call it. All I'd say is just divorcing from the other numbering scheme. If it's not the same product, would be my recommendation. Just because otherwise we'll end up in the same hole that we were in before.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, with that, I mean, I think there's a lot more to be said on that, maybe. But I want to be cognizant of the time. So if there's more, if you all have more thoughts on that, please feel free to use the mailing list or Slack or whatever. Definitely interested in your opinion, especially from the perspective of what's right for the user, with the caveat that someone has to do this work, right? So like, if you're proposing something that requires a bunch of work, then like you have to figure out how to where that work is coming from. But that aside, definitely interested in any feedback that folks have on that topic and on anything else we've discussed. I want to wrap things up here. Really appreciate everyone's time, especially for those of you staying up late at night to make this meeting. We'll swap the times around and punish Steve next time. And as always, thank you for being such awesome members of the Linkerd community and giving your time and energy to this project that we all know and love. Really appreciate that on behalf of all the maintainers. Really appreciate your time and energy on this.
We appreciate the work you do, guys.
All right. Thanks, folks.
Thanks.
All right.
See you later.
Good night.